Hey, what's going on, guys? So this is going to be the first video on this channel, and it'll probably be one of the longest ones because it's going to be my personal journey of how I went from being a heroin addict to being extremely successful in the tech industry, creating my own business, and creating an educational YouTube channel with 2.2 million subscribers and making quite a bit of money in the process. And I don't say those things to brag at all. I'm saying it because it just shows the stark contrast between 2 points in my life. And I think that it can help inspire people that are in similar negative situations that I was in. Not necessarily just drug addiction, but any kind of addiction, poverty, mental illness, anything like that. And in addition to being a drug addict, I was diagnosed at a pretty young age with depression and anxiety, which I still deal with, along with sometimes crippling social anxiety, to the point where I know it's just held me back a ton in my career. And I have a son who's autistic, and while I've never been tested, I have my suspicions that I'm also on the spectrum. It does seem to run in my family a little bit. So I grew up pretty poor. I wasn't handed anything. I've spent 2 years in jail for drug offenses and theft to get drugs. I've been in, countless detoxes and other drug programs, and the list just goes on and on. So we're just going to take a kind of a trip down memory lane. This channel is going to be about how I navigated through those issues and how I can use a lot of that knowledge to help people. So it's not like every video is going to be just about me. I'm not that narcissistic. So like I said, this will probably be one of the longer videos, and just because I'm going to start from the beginning and just share my journey. So I'd suggest treating it kind of like a podcast. Maybe listen to it in the background while you drive or while you exercise or something like that. Yeah, so I'll just get started. So I grew up in Massachusetts. I was born in Lynn, Mass, a city just north of Boston. My family's from there, but my mother chose to move us out when I was young, to move us to a nicer city more north of Boston. She thought that would help keep me out of trouble because Lynn isn't a great place to live. It's not a great place to raise kids. And, she just thought that was a good thing, which I guess it was, but it didn't really work out as planned. So my mother was or is a hardworking person. She was a CNA at a nursing home. She's retired now, but I just remember her working double shifts growing up just to scrape by. And her and my dad split up when I was about 8. My dad was a great guy. He had a huge heart, but he was an alcoholic and a drug addict with a lot of the same mental health issues that I have, which is anxiety, depression. He lost his life in 2015 from a heroin or a fentanyl overdose. So addiction has really just hit my family hard. And my mother did eventually remarry. I didn't get along with my stepfather growing up. We had a lot of, we butt heads a lot, but now we're good now that we're both older and wiser. So no issues with family relationships today. So even though we moved to a nicer city because my mother didn't want me getting into trouble, when I was a teenager, I still gravitated toward the wrong crowd or the bad kids. And I always felt like I didn't fit in, and the troublemakers seemed to accept me more than other kids, and they just kind of rubbed off on me. And I would say my first real friend in the town that I moved to when I was about 10 was a kid named Mike, and he was a couple years older than me. He was the son of one of my mother's best friends at the time, and we just kind of clicked. And he was a really big kid. He was a tough kid, good fighter. He was known for that. He was like 6 feet, 6'2" at 14, 15 years old. I was a small, skinny, scrawny kid, and but people didn't really mess with me because they knew who Mike was. In fact, we would say we were cousins because our moms were so close. And Mike kind of introduced me to other kids, and a lot of those kids would drink a lot and go to parties, and I started doing that stuff, smoking weed, even taking pills at a young age. I had bad social anxiety, so this helped me just make more friends as a kid and socialize. So I started drinking, going to parties at like 14, and I loved it because I was a shy kid, and alcohol really just helped me open up and actually talk to people. Unfortunately, I started to lean on alcohol a little too much, and I started to need to drink or smoke weed to just hang out with anyone. I never felt like I was able to socialize and just interact like normal people do when I was sober. For a very long time, I felt that way. And even to this day, it's just something I constantly struggle with. My mind just doesn't focus on what I'm supposed to be talking about or paying attention to. I'm busy focused internally, thinking, do I sound stupid and stuff like that? And it's irrational to people that don't understand it. But if you have social anxiety, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. So anyway, I made a couple more good friends, another kid named Mike, my friend John, who I still talk to pretty regularly, who was doing pretty well. My first friend, Mike, that I mentioned, he actually died later on in 2010, I believe, of an overdose, of course, like most of the people that I know. He was like 29 or 30 at the time. But when he was about 18, he got into heroin. And a lot of the kids in my town started to get into it. We were just north of a city called Lawrence, which is one of the worst cities in New England. It's known for just high crime and hard drugs. And in the 90s, a lot of the teenagers in my town started making runs to Lawrence to get dope or heroin. And everyone was sniffing it at the time. Nobody was really using needles. But for a while, I didn't do it. And I was really upset with Mike and a lot of my other friends for getting into it. You know, I'd call them junkies and stuff like that. And that went on for a while until the 4th of July of 1999. I was 17 and my girlfriend of 3 years just broke up with me. And I just wasn't in good headspace. And I slept over Mike's house and he was sniffing dope. And I just said, fuck it. And I tried a line. And I didn't feel much at first. I did some more. I got really nauseous, but I felt this really strong sense of euphoria. Like nothing bothered me. The pain of my girlfriend leaving me was gone. I felt like my social anxiety was gone and I could just go out and just do whatever, you know, talk to whoever. And it was like a comfort that I can't really put into words. So the next day we woke up, he still had some dope left over. I did it again. And over the next few weeks, I started hanging out, not just with Mike, but with other kids that were getting high. And it just seemed innocent. You know, we'd get some dope in Lawrence and we'd go to the mall and just drive around and, you know, smoke weed, listen to music. I didn't realize it was at the beginning of a hardcore heroin addiction that would affect me for the rest of my life. And a few weeks went by and it came to the point where I had no money, no way to get money, and no way to get dope. And I started getting like hot flashes, my legs hurt, my stomach was messed up, I felt really depressed. And this was my first time in withdrawal. And with heroin or any opiates, if you use them for like even 3 or 4 days straight, your body starts to depend on it and it doesn't function properly. And if you stop, you get really sick. And I knew that this happened just from hearing it from other people, but I didn't think it would bother me for some reason. But it did. And a lot of people say that it's like the flu. I hate that description because it only covers some of the physical things. One of the worst parts is just the mental part. And the best way I can describe it is that every fiber of your being is just screaming at you to get more, you know, to get better, to feel better. And nothing else matters. And even the people that are closest to you, they can't help you, they can't stop you if you're not ready. And you steal from people, you just do things that it's not you. And that's why I hate when I see people or hear people judge drug addicts or bash them, because it's not really them. The drugs just kind of take over. So I would say about three or 4 months into my addiction, I'm still like 17 years old. I was sniffing at dope still. I wasn't dealing with needles or anything. A lot of my friends started to move to needles, and I don't know, I was just scared of them at the time. I did eventually use them, but I'll get to that. So I was with another kid one night. We were walking around, breaking into cars, because that was my day. It was just either shoplifting, boosting from stores, or you know, stealing stuff from cars, anything to make money. We would steal steaks from the supermarket and sell them at bars downtown and stuff like that. But I was going around breaking into cars, and one of the keys was in one of the cars. And we ended up just taking it for a joyride to go to, you know, more remote areas to steal more stuff. And we ended up driving by a cop with a car with a couple cops in it. And they ended up pulling us over. And I had 2 backpacks full of more stolen stuff from other cars in the back seat. So I knew I was fucked, and I just ended up getting arrested with this other kid. We slept in the police station for a night or two and then went to court. And right from court, I just got 90 days in jail. You know, 17 years old. never been in like juvenile DYS or anything like that. So it was my very first time. And I went to the Middleton County Jail, got stripped down, put on an orange jumpsuit. I was in withdrawal, so I was sick as a dog. I was extremely depressed to the point where I just wanted to die. You know, I remember just laying in my cell at night and just not wanting to live anymore, and just thinking of like the pain I was putting my mother through and people that loved me, and it was horrible. And I was scared. You know, the first time I went to jail, Middleton it has a lot of gang members from Lawrence and Lynn, and I was scared at first, but I quickly realized that as long as you don't disrespect anyone or you don't join a gang or anything like that, for the most part, people are going to leave you alone. You know, I ended up making a few friends, and we'd play cards and gamble soups and honey buns and shit like that, have some laughs, and it honestly wasn't that bad after a while, after I was done withdrawing and being sick and realizing that I'm not going to get killed. So I ended up having my 18th birthday in jail. I wrapped up that bit in 2000, and when I got out, I was on probation, and I ended up back with my girlfriend for about another year or so. And for the most part, I stayed clean outside of drinking once in a while. I stayed away from all hard drugs for a while until 2001, when again lost my girlfriend, and I just didn't do well by myself when I was younger. I don't know. I don't know what it was. If I had a girlfriend, I was good, and I could just, I don't know, lay down and watch movies at night. But by myself, I was just a maniac. So at this point, I started using needles, and this made my addiction so much worse. And it was all I focused on every day, all day for months and months. And my entire day, like I said, just consisted of shoplifting, shooting dope, running around Lawrence or Boston. Every month or so, I'd go to a detox program for 5 days where they'd give you a drug called methadone that stops the withdrawal. And I would have good intentions. I'd plan on going to a halfway house for long-term treatment, but after 5 days, the methadone wore off. I was still felt sick and just went out and just did the same shit again. You know, I was back in Lawrence getting high that day. So one morning in 2002, I had taken a bunch of Xanax pills the night before, and they were still in my system. And mixing Xanax or any benzodiazepine with an opiate is very dangerous. And that morning, I woke up and I did my morning shot because I had a habit. So the first thing in the morning, I'd have to get high or I'd be sick. And I remember feeling really good and then laying on my stomach in my mother's house on my futon in my bedroom. I was living with my mom at the time. And I just kind of went out and I woke up on my back with EMTs all around me saving my life. And what happened was my mother came home early from work that day, and she walked by my room and she heard a weird sound. And that sound was just me gasping for my last breath. So she opened the door and she saw me overdosing and dying. And she called the ambulance. They were able to bring me back. I'm not a wicked religious person, but I really believe that God was looking out for me that day. And because she wasn't even supposed to be home, you know, and she never came in my room. She just happened to hear me gasping for air. And, you know, it just worked out. And you would think that would be powerful enough to make me stop, but nope. I went to the hospital, got treated, and later that day I was back out using. And that's just how powerful addiction is. So after I got caught up again for theft, I ended up getting sentenced to a year in jail with a year suspended, which means that I had to serve a year, but when I got out, if I screwed up again, I'd have to do the other year, which of course I did. So I ended up doing both years, and I would say between 2002 and 2005, I just kind of became institutionalized. I ended up getting paroled to a halfway house in Boston during this time, and I did well for a few months, but I ended up getting high down there and getting sent back to county. And the last time I was locked up was 2005, and they let me out, but I had to do a program called SOAP, and it was a drug program that was 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So it was like a full-time job, and I really didn't think I could do it, but it was my only way out is if I agreed to at least try. And I ended up messing up yet again, but I quickly ended up getting on a methadone clinic. And methadone is a synthetic opiate that fills those receptors in your brain that crave opiates. So you don't get sick and you don't have cravings. And a lot of people talk shit and trash methadone and say it's just another drug, but it allowed me to finally have a normal life. And in all honesty, it saved my life. And it doesn't get you high. You might feel a little buzz the first week or so, but then your body gets used to it and you don't feel anything. It's just like you're normal. And I was on it for years, and I could finally function as a normal person. And now they have a drug called Suboxone, which is a bit less harsh. And I just think it's great that they have these medications to stop us from using much worse stuff and dying. So during this time when I was in this program, I ended up meeting my wife, Jen, who's still my wife to this day. And I fell in love with her, and I didn't want to screw it up. She ended up getting pregnant just a few months after we met, which, me being newly sober and being on probation and stuff seemed like a just horrible idea to have a kid. But this is what it really took to make me stop how I was living. And I knew that I'd have this little girl that depends on me to take care of her and provide for her. So prior to that, I only had to worry about myself. And at the time, I didn't really care about myself. And I had little to no work experience at the time. I had no passions, but I was always interested in technology. And in fact, I remember the first time that I was in court before I got sentenced, my lawyer had told the judge that I planned on going to community college for computer science. And the judge looked at me and said, he has 20 counts of larceny. The computer industry is just going to have to wait for Mr. Travesey. And I thought that was funny. But a few years later, I decided to actually go to community college for computer science. And I never graduated. I never got a degree, but it kind of got me started learning about hardware and networking, software, things like that. And then after my daughter was born, the only financial income I had was disability because I was on Social Security for my mental health issues. And I have a 5-page record, so you can imagine how hard it would be to get a job, even at McDonald's. But I decided to kind of go around that and do my own thing. So I started my own business. And my very first business was called Brad's Desktop Repair, because I had gotten my A+ certification and I knew desktop hardware. So I put an ad in the paper, yes, the newspaper. This was like 2006. I got a few calls and I was able to get a few small jobs, and I was making a few $100s. It wasn't enough to live on, but it felt good to actually make money on my own in a legal way. And this kind of started me on entrepreneurship. And I did this for a while, and later that year, I changed the name of my company to Tech Guy Computer Services, and I found a little office space in town or the next town over for, I think it was $450 a month, which was pretty good at the time. So people could come in and bring their computers to be fixed. And the funny thing is, I wasn't all that great at it. The majority of what I did was just backing up their files, wiping the system, and reinstalling Windows, or maybe changing out some memory or a power supply, things that it sounds hard to non-tech savvy people, but it's really easy. A couple of months into it, I decided to start a website and to learn some web development. And I did have one class in community college that taught me some basic HTML. Like I said, I didn't really learn that much in school, but by this time I had dropped out of community college to work more, and I decided to learn HTML and CSS just on my own. I learned WordPress and another CMS called Joomla, PHP, MySQL. I know that this isn't a tech channel, so I'm not going to really get into that, but I learned a whole bunch of technologies for web development. And I liked it so much more than fixing computers. And I knew there was much more of an opportunity in web development. Even at that time, PC repair was starting to die. So I added web development to my services, and I started building websites for local businesses. And I would get work on like freelancing websites. I had a rough start. I had some bad experiences when it comes to clients because of a few things, because of my social anxiety. I also have anger issues. So, clients would piss me off and I would be acting inappropriate, but I learned to get over that really quick. I'd say dealing with clients was the worst or most difficult part for me when it comes to business. I would try to email as much as possible. I just feel like my mind would go blank when I had to talk to them. I felt really nervous and tongue-tied. I was still, I didn't have much experience in the real world. I was doing drugs and in jail for the past 10 years. But I ended up pushing through and dealing with it and becoming pretty successful. I ended up hiring 2 local developers, and things went pretty well for a couple of years. Jen got pregnant again in 2009, and my son was born. And he was born with just a whole bunch of issues, including something called chromosome 18q deletion syndrome. And it's a rare genetic disorder that causes a wide range of developmental and physical problems. And he was born with a cleft palate, a tethered spinal cord. He had hypospadias, which is a birth defect of the urethra. So we were happy to have a new child, but at the same time, it was friggin' terrifying. And we had to take him to the hospital a lot. He's now 14 and he's nonverbal. The defect stunts his growth. So if you saw him, you would think he's like 6 or 7. I would say this is the most stressful part of my life right now. I had always hoped for some kind of miracle when he was younger, for him just to snap out of it, but that was really naive thinking. So now I kind of realize we have to take care of him for the rest of our lives, for the rest of his life. And if you have a kid with special needs, you know how hard that can be, both physically and mentally, emotionally. However, I am grateful that he's actually happy, and it could always be worse. This kid's dying of cancer. And he's also an incredibly loving kid. I learned a lot from him, actually. He has all these issues, and he still enjoys his life. He has a great sense of humor, great personality. So when I'm feeling down and I'm feeling sorry for myself, I look at him, and it just snaps me out of it. So shortly after he was born, I did have a couple relapses with drugs. This isn't something I talk about much. I say I've been clean for like 18 years or so, but the truth is I did have some slip-ups, and I ended up running into some old friends, doing a little dope, and it brought me on like a 1 or 2 month run. But luckily, when that happened, I was able to just pick myself back up. And because this time I had 2 kids, one with special needs, and I felt extremely guilty for what I was doing. And I know a lot of people judge others that do drugs when they have kids, but you have to understand how powerful addiction is. A lot of people end up losing their children, and it seems like they don't care, but that's not the case with everybody. Some people are just shitbags, but it's not the case with most people. They're just lost in their addiction. And I didn't want to be one of those people that loses their kids and their family, so I was fortunate to be able to get clean pretty quickly at those times. So anyway, when I got things back on track, I saw a listing on a freelancing site for an HTML5 course instructor to do video courses and teach. And I did this. I tried it out. It was with a company called Eduonics. I had also started a YouTube channel around this time to try and get new clients and promote my business. And all my training was through online courses and YouTube channels like The New Boston. So I took a shot at doing tutorials, and I did that HTML5 course. And I look back at it now, and it kind of makes me cringe, but people liked it. It did really well. I had a much thicker Boston accent back then, and I thought that would hurt me. But later on, I found out people actually liked it. So I also discovered that I just love doing it. I love teaching. I loved doing my own projects, learning new programming languages and technologies. It was just something I really loved to do. And you didn't have to deal with clients, which was one of the best parts. So my YouTube channel quickly grew. Eduonics had consistent work for me. So I was making content on the side for years until eventually I decided to stop the Tech Guy company and start doing my own courses. Because with Eduonics, I was making like $3,000 a course. But when I started doing my own courses, I started making 20 grand a month, then 30, then 40, up to like 60 or $70,000 a month, which is more money than I had ever dreamed of. I think my highest paid year was like 2018. And it was like 1.3 million for that year. And it was just from doing courses, YouTube. I had some small side projects I was doing. That's another thing that I did throughout the years, was create small websites and little projects that earned a steady income, either through advertising or selling things like plugins or articles or memberships. I'm a big believer in creating your own products and services. I did work for a company for a little less than a year doing development work, but I mean, I'm glad I did it because I got to learn a lot about working with other developers, but eventually I knew it wasn't for me. I knew that I always wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to work for anyone else, not to bash anyone that does want to do a 9 to 5. But since around 2020, things have trended downward a bit financially for a few reasons. One, I have some health issues. I have severe migraines, vertigo, tinnitus, which is horrible, like ringing in the ears. Things that just make it nothing like serious, but things that make it hard to work some days. And then also, I was just working way too much. I was neglecting my family. So that's another reason that I don't do as much. Also, I was one of the first to do the whole YouTube, the dev YouTube thing. Now there's so much content out there, it's hard to compete. I still do well financially, but not like I used to. And I'm fine with that. You know, I have a beautiful house. I have my dream car, a 2020 Audi R8. We have a rental property on the beach. It's nothing fancy, but it's another way to bring in income. My family is happy and healthy. My daughter just became a CNA at 17, and she plans on going to college for nursing. She's an amazing person. My son does have severe special needs, but he has a great life. You know, he's probably the happiest in the house, actually. And I still have mental and physical health issues, but I'm able to deal with them the best way that I can. I don't need to keep making millions to be happy. I used to get really stressed out when like YouTube videos wouldn't perform as well, or a course was delayed, or my income started to fall. But over the years, I've learned to relax more and just realize that everything's going to be okay. And I have a life that most people would dream of, you know, and I was able to save quite a bit. So even if everything went to shit, I'd be okay for a while. And I don't take any of that for granted. You know, my old life, doing drugs and jail and all that, completely unrecognizable. And I almost feel like I'm in like a different dimension or something like that. But I never forget where I come from. I never judge other addicts or people that are going through shit. You can never walk in someone else's shoes. And as far as drugs go these days, for those of you that don't know, the drug heroin used to be one of the worst of the worst. Now, actual heroin isn't even around anymore. Now it's fentanyl, which is much worse in every way. It's 100 times stronger. Now they're mixing it with something called xylazine, which is a horse tranquilizer that's rotting people's flesh. People are having to get their arms and legs amputated. They're walking around like zombies. It's a whole new world when it comes to drugs. And I'm very grateful that I'm far from that world now. You know, I've had countless friends and family members die from drugs. My own father, my best friend, people I grew up with and went to middle school with as kids are gone. It just infected my whole area of the country, the Northeast. And I know it's affected all over the country and world, but in my area specifically, it just was really bad. And if you know someone struggling with drugs, you know, try to offer them help. They don't always want to take it, but if they do, give them a ride to detox or whatever you can. You know, they may not be ready and they may not take your help, but still offer it. So I know that was a lot of rambling, but I just wanted to share a little bit of my story. I want you guys to just know who I am going forward with this channel. I know that a lot of you came over from Traversy Media, and I have told my story partially over there, so you might already know some of this stuff. But for those of you that are new, I just wanted to kind of introduce myself. I really want to focus on self-help and just sharing things that I've learned from my own experiences to help others. You know, I want to focus on things like social anxiety and other mental health issues, physical health, business, entrepreneurship, family, becoming successful, and anything else I can think of. You know, I don't want to be a corny self-help channel. I want to be different and just more personal and keep things more just real and raw. So I hope you stick around, and thanks so much for watching.